Good afternoon and welcome to the July 28th, 2022 Glendale Audit Committee. Meetings are broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable Channel 6 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. And you may call 818-548-4013 for program schedules. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be taken when that agenda item is discussed. Roll call, please.
Committee member Ed Kashadurian.
Present.
Rose Vart Nazarian is absent. Alex Parajon.
Present.
And Chair Zaria Mirian.
Present. Next item, please.
Item number 2, business agenda. Report of recording secretary regarding posting of agenda. The agenda for the July 28, 2022 Audit Committee meeting was posted on July 25, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Excellent, thank you. Next item.
Item number 3, oral communications.
Do we have anybody that has either called in? I don't see any cards. Nope, no calls?
No calls.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next item, please.
Item number 4, approval of minutes. Minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on April 28, 2022.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Committee member Ed Kashadurian.
Yes.
Rose Vart Nazarian is absent. Alex Parajon.
Yes.
And Chair Zaria Mirian.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item number 5, action items. Part A, election of Audit Committee Chair.
Okay, so we are in a interesting situation considering that there has just been an election and that the city council is, a new city council has been seated, and we are expecting that the city council will be appointing some members. Ms. Nazarian tendered her resignation from the committee, and today was to be her last meeting, but she was unable to make it to today's meeting. So Ms. Nazarian will also no longer be on the audit committee. So it's just the three amigos. And so I inquired about what the process would be here. And I think that putting off the election with the idea that we'll wait on the city council to appoint new members is probably not a great idea, considering that it's possible that given the immense amount of work that they have to do, they might not get to it by our next meeting. So I suggest that we move forward with the election, and then once the council appoints a full committee, next year we can then, have an election with five possible members. Any ideas or comments about that?
Mr. Chair Mirian, I agree. I think at this point we have been in this situation for give and take maybe 2-3 years now, and I think it is prudent on our part to, I think, move forward and have the election of the committee chair done today, and then wait until next year.
I also agree, but I would like to identify which council member are we under. I know I'm under currently Brotman, which I know he said he's going to reappoint me because we talked actually a couple of days ago. And what about you, Ed?
Originally, Mr. Garpetian, but I think I'm technically under Mr. Kasakian, Mayor Kasakian.
Yeah, So, and I was appointed by Councilmember Najarian sometime, not last decade, the decade before. So, yeah, and he just made it in, thankfully.
So you still got your job.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. So then let's go ahead and move on to the action item 5A, election of Audit Committee Chair. We'll open the floor for nominations.
I'll move to nominate Mr. Amirian to continue as chair.
Thank you.
I was going to ask him to see if he's still interested in pursuing this high-paying role, but Mr. Narian, if you get my vote too, if you considering running again.
I appreciate that, and I did reach out to city staff and ask them about this situation prior. I really do appreciate that, and I am willing to serve as long as you'll have me. Any other nominations? I'm going to wait about 30 seconds. Okay. Hearing no other nominations, let's close the nominations and let's have a roll call, please.
Committee Member Ed Kashadurian,
Yes.
Rose Nazarian is absent, Alex Parajon,
Yes.
and Chair Zaria Mirian.
Yes, and thank you again. I really appreciate your continued confidence, and I wouldn't be able to do what I do without having two excellent supporting committee members, and I really do appreciate your continued support on that. Let's move on to the next item, please.
Item number 5, action items. B, election of Audit Committee Secretary.
So, Ms. Antonessian has done a wonderful job in the past year, and I would suggest to my fellow committee members that she, if she's willing, continue to serve in that role as secretary, if she's willing to.
I am willing to serve.
Excellent. So let's have an official nomination there, please.
I'll make a motion to, this is the committee secretary, to elect Ms. Antonessian for committee secretary.
I second.
Excellent. Roll call, please.
Committee Member Ed Kashadurian,
Yes.
Rose Nazarian is absent, Alex Parajon,
Yes.
and Chair Zaria Mirian.
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
No, I'm kidding. Congratulations. Yeah, thank you, Ani, for your excellent work over the past year and for being willing to serve as the secretary for another year. We do appreciate it. Next item, please.
Item number C, annual report to City Council.
Excellent. I have in front of me our letter, our annual report to the City Council, which I will read into the record, dated today, July 28th, 2022. Dear Mayor Kasakian and City Council members, each year, the Audit Committee must report our actions and activities to the City Council per Glendale Municipal Code Section 2.82.100. The purpose of this memo is to communicate our activities for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. The Audit Committee met 4 times during fiscal year 2021-2022, where we were provided with financial updates and internal audit activity reports. In 2018, the Audit Committee started to conduct paperless meetings in keeping with the City Council's priorities of fiscal responsibility and sustainability. I am pleased to report that the paperless meeting methodology enabled seamless transitions between conducting the audio-video conference and in-person public meetings. 2 of these 4 meetings were conducted with a combination of in-person and call-in methods due to COVID-19 social distancing requirements, 1 meeting was 100% virtual, and 1 meeting was 100% in person at the City Council chambers. Besides these regular meetings, I have also worked with city staff regularly via email, sharing my thoughts on emerging risks and concerns and receiving clarification from staff on questions. The Audit Committee assists the City Council by reviewing financial information and management reports and by providing independent recommendations regarding the scope, priority, and methods of audit-related activities within the city. Despite the evolving situation with COVID-19, with the COVID-19 pandemic, the Audit Committee continued to carry out its responsibilities during this unprecedented time. The financial activities by the Audit Committee include: 1, received audit communications from Clifton Larson Allen LLP on the responsibility, scope, and activities for the annual audit of the city for the period ending June 30th, 2021. 2, received and reviewed the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, CAFR, for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. 3, received financial and budgetary reports from the Finance Department and City Management. The internal audit activities by the Audit Committee include: 1, received and reviewed the fiscal year 2021 work plan status update, the fiscal year 21-22 internal audit annual work plan, and monitored progress in addressing the risk priorities for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. 2, reviewed internal audit reports as they were issued, were briefed on all completed audit assignments by internal audit staff and department representatives, reviewed the progress of quarterly follow-up activities, and discussed the action plan related to outstanding audit issues reaching specified criteria. 3, monitored the types of projects performed by internal audit staff to ensure ongoing independence in the internal audit function. The Audit Committee members wish to express our appreciation to city staff that support our efforts and keep us informed of events and issues in the city. We look forward to continuing to serve the interests of the city of Glendale in the coming year. Respectfully submitted by yours truly and Audit Committee members Edmund Khachadurian, Rosevart Nazarian, appointed July 27, 2021, and Alejandro Parajon. So having read that into the record, I believe we need a motion to accept that report to the City Council.
Just a point of clarification. Do we
Yes.
need to strike out the name of Ms. Nazarian? What is the date on the?
The date is today's date, and technically speaking, today was to be her last meeting, so she notified staff that she would be resigning after this meeting. And so technically speaking, she served on the committee during the prior year, and so I believe her name should be included in the letter. But I'm willing to hear from staff or
I guess I'm asking because I think she's not here to either, agree or not agree.
I think that's a great question. I think if we have a quorum here and we decide that this letter is a full and complete annual report to the City Council, then I think we would be speaking on her behalf in abstention.
And then, if I may, the minutes would reflect that she was absent and didn't participate in the vote, but that the report is going through at the time of while she was a member of the committee. So technically speaking, she is still today, if she were to walk in and if her conflict changed and she walked in, she could participate in the
I see.
meeting.
Okay.
So I move to approve the annual report to City Council.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Committee member Ed Khachadurian.
Yes.
Rosevart Nazarian is absent. Alex Parajon
Yes.
and Chair Zaria Mirian.
Yes. Let's move on to item number 6, please.
Item number 6, reports and information. Part A, internal audit activity report as of Part C.
Well, what I'd like, go ahead and read Part A, and then I will move it around.
Internal audit activity report as of June 30, 2022. Jesse Jung, internal audit manager.
So, Ms. Zhang, I am going to move item 6C to be right before 6A in order to take into account our external auditor's very valuable time. So let's go ahead and read item 6C into the record, please.
Item 6C, report from Clifton Larson Allen LLP on the audit of fiscal year ended June 30, 2022. Alwin De Leon, Finance Accounting Manager.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. The city is engaged with Clifton Larson Allen, LLP or CLA, to perform auditing services for the city for 3 years, ending on February 28, 2023, with 3 one-year options to extend. Currently, the city is in its 3rd year of the contract with CLA to perform the audit for fiscal year ended June 30, 2022. CLA staff performed their preliminary fieldwork for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2022, last early June for 2 weeks. Prior to CLA's preliminary fieldwork, accounting staff worked with various department sections to complete each section's internal control and operations procedure inquiries by CLA. CLA staff will perform their final fieldwork starting early October for 3 weeks to complete the audit, and most of the fieldwork will be done remotely, and they will come to the office on as-needed basis to view paper documents. Finance is planning to have the first draft of the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, or ACFR, to be completed by mid-October, and we expect to get the opinion letter from CLA by mid-November and present the ACFR to the City Council on December 13th council meeting. We'll be back here next January to present the audit results and adopted ACFR for fiscal year ended June 30, 2022. So now I would like to turn it over to Daphne Munoz, partner at Clifton Larson Allen LLP, to present CLA's audit plan for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2022, and she'll do her presentation remotely. Thank you, Chair and community members.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. You can hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Munoz. We
First of
miss
all,
you over here.
Thank you for accommodating me presenting virtually. I just have some medical issues that cannot allow me to be there present in the room personally. Again, also thank you for moving our item up.
You're very welcome, and we all wish you a speedy recovery.
Thank you. I'm here to discuss the 2022 audit, and let me share my screen. Not working. Oh, there it is. And my presentation will cover our scope of our services, the responsibility and management responsibility, and as well as timing of the audit. So our scope of services, CLA is performed to perform the following. We will be doing a financial statement audits of the financial city of Glendale, which will be included the annual comprehensive financial report. We will also be performing a single audit under uniform guidance, and this is a compliance audit of federal grants because the city will spend more than $750 of federal expenditures. We will be also issuing separate opinions for the separately issued financial statements of the electric utility and water utility funds. We will be performing agreed upon procedures for the National Transit Database reporting submitted by the Transit Department, as well as agreed upon procedures for the reports submitted to the housing, reported to have through the REACT submission for the Section 8 program. And lastly, we will be also doing a financial statement audit for the ICIS JPA. Our main responsibility is to form and express an opinion whether the financial statements, which is prepared by management, are presented fairly in conformity with GAAP. Our audit will be performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as generally accepted government auditing standards. We will be designing our audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatements. Reasonable assurance rather than absolute means that we do not attempt to ensure that all data contained in the financial statements are 100% accurate because we will not be testing all the transactions that happen during the year. Our audit will include consideration of the internal control over financial reporting, as well as for the basis of designing our audit procedures that are appropriate in the circumstance, but we will not be issuing or expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the city's internal control over financial reporting. Our audit will also include performing some tests of the city's compliance and whether with certain provisions of laws, regulations, and contracts and grants. And again, the objective of the tests is not to provide an opinion, but as to design the audit procedures for the financial statement audit. However, if during the review of internal controls and testing of city's compliance, we will be communicating and we find some significant matters that we feel are relevant to the responsibilities of those charged with governance in overseeing their financial reporting process, we will communicate those significant matters in a written letter. So the audit does not relieve the management or those charged with governance with their responsibilities over financial reporting. Management responsibilities includes the preparation of the financial statements, designing the internal control over those financial statements, as well as implementing and adhering to those internal controls. Management is also responsible for providing information for the audit, including written representations at the conclusion of the audit. For the timing, as Alwin mentioned, we've done our interim audit in June, and this is where we gather information about the city's environment, this is where we evaluate the internal controls that are relevant to our audit and that determine whether those controls, either individually or in combination, is capable of preventing, detecting, or correcting material misstatements. During this time, we determined that the controls have been implemented, that the control exists and that the city is using them. Some of the specific areas we looked at are the accounts payable processes, cash disbursement, accounts receivable, and utility billing. During this time, we will also review the minutes of city meetings and as well as review important contracts and debt agreements that the city entered into during the year. Our year-end audit, which will happen in October, will include the account analysis of year-end balances and performing our substantive procedures, which could include confirmations and some cutoff procedures. And again, as Alwin mentioned, the third phase of the audit is the report preparation, which the first draft is expected in December with the presentation to the council in December. Excuse me. And the last part of my presentation is just to discuss a couple of new pronouncements that will affect the financial reporting. This year, the city has to implement GASB 87, which will change the way the city report leases in the financial statements. And the other one is SAS 134, which really doesn't affect the financial statement, but it affects our opinion that the format of the independent auditor's report changed a little this year. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Munoz. Questions from the committee members?
I don't have any.
No questions from me.
No questions here either. Thank you very much for your thorough presentation, and we again hope you get some rest and recover quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next item, please.
Item 6A Internal Audit Activity Report as of June 30, 2022. Jesse Jung, Internal Audit Manager.
Good afternoon, Chair Miriam and Audit Committee members, Jesse Zhang, Internal Audit Manager. This afternoon, I would like to provide you a report on the internal audit activities for the quarter ended June 30th, 2022. So I will go over each of the 7 sections outlined at the beginning of this activity report. So Section 1 covers projects completed. So this past quarter, we completed 3 projects, and we prepared 3 PowerPoint presentations for you. So let me see. Okay. So the first presentation was prepared by Samil Salim, our Senior Internal Auditor, and he's also joined via WebEx. The audit is Glendale Community College Parking Contract Audit Phase 2. So you're probably somewhat familiar with the background because you heard the Phase 1 of the audit, and this presentation will we'll review the background information briefly, and then we'll focus on the Phase 2 of the audit results. So let me see. Samuel, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you all hear
Okay.
me?
Yeah, go ahead. Start your presentation.
Mr. Salim, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Let me share my screen.
And can you speak up a little bit, please?
Sure. How am I sounding?
If you could be just a little bit louder, I think everyone would appreciate it.
Okay, 1 second. How is it now?
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so as Jesse mentioned, this is Phase 2 of the Glendale Parking Facilities Agreement Audit. Just to give a little background, because I know that the last one was in December when we presented it. So this is an agreement between the City of Glendale and the Glendale Community Colleges over the parking revenues at the GCC. And so this is a map of the GCC. The parking lots at the bottom are owned and operated by the City of Glendale, and the main student parking lot at the top is owned by GCC, but Glendale also services the meter at that location in exchange for a fee. And some of the contract overview, the administration. So the administration is comprised of 2 individuals from the City of Glendale and 2 individuals from GCC, and collectively they're responsible to set rates, hours of operations, and policies governing the parking lots. Accounting. Both parties are required to keep separate accountings of all the revenues so that they could be tracked easily and they're not intermingled with other expenses and revenues. Both parties are entitled to 50% of the total revenues collected, irrespective of what lots they belong to. And then finally, payments are due on a quarterly basis, but as the last audit mentioned, they're not actually doing it quarterly. They're changing it to twice a year, but that's what the contract states as of now, at least. So another high-level overview. So revenue collection. So there's 2 types of meters at the time of the audit, at least. So one are the older coin type meters you see on the left, and then the newer pay stations that take credit card and coins, and the older ones only took coins. So the City of Glendale is the ones that serviced both of these meters, and then collects 100% of the revenue from the coins and 100% of the credit card and coins from the pay stations. The GCC, on the other hand, is primarily responsible for selling student parking permits. And that's what this phase of the audit covered, is the parking permit related revenues. And they collect 100%, and on twice a year now, we send them 50% of what we collect, and they in turn send us 50% of what they collect. So that's kind of the revenue process at a high level. For the revenues for the audit period, which is fiscal year 2021, the city collected $16,000 from the meters. And these are all very much lower figures due to COVID-19 campus-related closures. And then the student permits from the GCC side, they actually had a net deficit of $22,000, which was primarily the result of refunds given to students for the campus being closed. Normally, student parking permits are around $1 million in revenue. So the GCC permit sale process, so now we're specifically on GCC. The GCC has a police department on campus, and they're the ones responsible for ordering and receiving the parking permits. When they get them, they give the batch to the tuition office, because the tuition office is the one that actually holds the student permits and sells them to students in one of three ways. Either in person at the tuition office, online, on which the students log online, make the purchases, and then the tuition office mails them the permit. And lastly, the third methods are tablet sales. They instituted these tablet sales. It's essentially a form of in-person payment to reduce the congestion that takes place at the tuition office. And then at the end of the semester or whenever all the student parking permits that weren't sold and all the student parking permits that were may be returned for refunds, they're returned back to the police department, who in turn disposes of the parking permits. That's how the sales take place generally. The specifics of the audit. The objective was to ensure GCC's parking revenues are complete, supported, and properly allocated in accordance with the Glendale Parking Facilities Agreement. And like I said, the scope period was July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021. Audit process, we interviewed city and GCC parking personnel. We reviewed their revenue transactions and support. We sampled some transactions to ensure the 50-50 split took place between what they collected and what they provided to us. And summary of results, we were able to verify the accuracy of GCC's reported parking permit revenues and refunds amount. However, we did note 2 opportunities for improvement related to obtaining and retaining support of the parking permit sales, and documenting responsibilities and procedures. So the first one, support of parking permit sales, we recommended them to retain tablet sales reports. So like I mentioned before, tablet sales are one of the 3 types of sales that take place. But the information is offline and not because it's a standalone system. So we recommended to retain that support so we could tie the revenue amounts reported from tablet sales to their source documents. Second one was retain refund forms. There was quite a few refunds issued due to COVID-19, but when we requested the backup documentation related to the refund forms that each student fills out, they weren't able to locate the forms due to a physical move that they did. They changed spaces from one to another, so they weren't able to locate them. So retain these. Thirdly is perform a reconciliation. Basically, perform a reconciliation of what was purchased to what was sold and refunded, and basically you end up with your ending balance. So they didn't perform a reconciliation of that type. So we recommended to do so going forward. and then retain permit sign-offs. So as I mentioned earlier, the police department is the one that purchases and gets the parking permits, and they in turn give it to the tuition office. Tuition office does their thing and returns it back to the police officer's station for destruction. But there's no sign-offs that take place when the police give it to the tuition office, and also when the tuition office gives it back to the police department. And these sign-offs would be a good piece of evidence documenting how many actual permits are being handed off and how many are being returned. And then it's just a simple matter of math to get to what the revenue should be if you know how many permits you have on hand. That was the number one. Result number two is pretty straightforward. It's just documenting the sales process and also the responsibilities. Like police department is responsible for ordering the permits. Tuition office is responsible for selling, doing reconciliations, things of that nature. And this one they did implement prior to the report issuance, so this one is closed as reflected on that red check mark there. With that, I'll field any questions that you may have. I believe Tad should also be in the audience if there's any questions I don't know about. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Questions from my fellow committee members?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Khashudurian.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Salim, I have a quick question. Thank you so much for the report. Very nice flow. I enjoyed it. The question that I have is that how come we don't have any electronic copies of these refund forms? Is there anywhere in the system that these refund, I mean, I understand that the physical forms are not available, but during COVID, people had to send in paper forms to request a refund, or this was done also online?
No, these are all paper forms. If they were to scan these, it would have been great, but no, but they're operating off paper over there.
And then I'm guessing at least there needs to be some sort of a paper trail of all of the initial parking tickets or the parking permits that were purchased. Like, is there any way to, because I think you mentioned a number that was quite high, like $1 million, right? And now we have a deficit of 22,000.
Right. So $1 million is the sales that normally take place on obviously a normal year, typically. For my audit period, they sold very few permits. The number of permits they sold was primarily to non-students for use of the, like if they wanted to use the gym, the library, or the pool, something of that nature. Maybe you have some straddlers buying some permits in that fashion, but there weren't any student permits sold during that time. All the refund, the 22,000 is mostly all just refunds for students.
I see.
It's in this time period, but the period before there were even more refunds, but it was just outside of our scope period.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Mr. Salim, is it on these permits? Do they have some sort of sequence numbers?
They are sequential, yes.
All right. So when they track them, I'm assuming there's some sort of your validation would have shown any missing permits or the ones that were refunded. So pretty much they must have that pretty standardized already, right?
It should be going forward, hopefully. For our scope period, they didn't really track like the numbers sold, and then comparing that to the sequence number. So if the police got sequence, I don't know, like say 200 and on, you could just do math that 199 were sold, that type of thing. They didn't track the sequence numbers or the numbers sold. For the students that did have their parking permits within their student account, they didn't consistently put it in the permit number in their account. So that's one of the recommendations that the reconciliation and retaining tablet sales, that's what that's getting at.
Okay, so now the other question with these permits is, once the student receives this permit, are they allowed to park on just those two different structures? And are they identified by a specific color, so forth?
So if a student buys a parking permit, they're allowed to, let me go there, maybe easier to see. They're allowed to park in these turquoise colored lots with that permit. There's also like a teacher lot, but that's a different permit, and those aren't sold. So that was outside of our scope. We were focused more on the revenue, but yeah, they're allowed to park at any of these turquoise colored lots.
Okay, well, the good thing is that the audit scope period you had was a low season for
Yeah.
the college compared to if you have a regular school year where you probably will have more of a challenging and be able to, scope out more items that maybe they're deficiency in.
Right. I mean, it allowed us to focus more on the process. So hopefully they could make those improvements before these permits are being sold and apply them going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Mr. Khashoggian, shoot.
Thank you. Mr. Salim, going back to the conversation, if I were to ask, you or whoever is responsible for these permits, whether or not these payments have been made against realized revenues in a previous period, will there be any way to kind of sort of clarify it, whether or not, oh yes, this person, after all, I'm assuming, okay, the paper trail is not there, the forms are not there, but probably there's a system somewhere that shows that Ed Kashadurian had paid the $75, if I'm wrong. I think it was $75. $75, and then now I'm requesting a refund. So the approval process needs to show a reversal of the transaction online. Is that something that can be, I'm not suggesting that we should, in terms of the controls that are in place, can be that something that we can maybe verify?
Yeah, so their student account does reflect like a sale was made for the parking permit, and it has the corresponding $75, and it also shows the $75 refund. It's just
Okay.
it doesn't track the actual permit number. So I don't know, like if I sold a total of 200 permits, I don't know exactly which 200 these were assigned to, and then to check them that way, if that makes sense.
No, I understand that, but at least from an accounting perspective, this is not a $22,000 payment, which you don't have any revenues to balance it against. So you're saying, no, there is a system, and the financial system definitely sort of will be able to show that, yes, there was a revenue realized, now we are basically making a refund.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellent.
No more questions.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions as well. Just some background. Would you walk us through why the split of the duties was handled the way it was handled, in terms of having both organizations, have kind of separate operations?
Oh, the background of that I may need, is
We
Tad in
have
the?
Excellent.
parking managers
Oh,
here.
excellent.
Good afternoon, Chair Mirian
Good
and
afternoon.
Commissioners. Tad Dombrowski, the parking manager. So this agreement, the new agreement was relatively new in 2019 was when it was put into place. Prior to that, there was a JPA that was in place with the college, and it was specifically to address the parking problems in the area, both from the residents that were getting inundated and we were getting the problems, and the students who didn't have places to park for GCC. So this became a partnership with the college to solve all the parking problems up there. When the way that the original agreement was structured, it had a sunset clause in it where once the debt was paid for the parking garages and improvements that had been done, the agreement would sunset. And we realized that we wanted that partnership to continue with them because we didn't want the calls from the residents and GCC being able to set their own parking policies, which may push people into the residence. And likewise, we have the parking assets up there, but we wanted to be able to manage them and keep some for our park services, keep some for other people, as well as keep the resident intact, but still be able to accommodate the students. So this was really, moving forward, this was one of those things that we looked at as a partnership and said, let's just put all the money together and split it 50-50 to each agency. Because of the debt service that we had before on the parking garage, both this, I believe the Civic Auditorium parking garage that is ours and the garage on their campus, I think that was both part of the original debt service. But because we had that debt service payment, it meant that both agencies under normal conditions would get a significant amount more of revenue than what we've been receiving under the original agreement because we wouldn't have the debt moving forward. COVID changed all of that, obviously, and just going back for a second to your question on the revenue side, we did book just before COVID hit, that last quarter, we booked somewhere in the neighborhood, I'm gonna say 400,000 was that last quarter of revenues that were actual realized revenues, and that was what was being refunded. The policies they had pushed and said, well, let's just have them come back next semester, but as we all know, COVID lasted a lot longer than next semester. So it kept being one of those things they would individually look at the person, and if they had transferred now to another college, they had done online, they didn't need that permit anymore, they would individually verify it and refund it from the realized revenues.
Got it. And I'm just curious, how's parking enforcement handled? Is that split between both the responsibilities and the revenue? I hate calling parking enforcement revenue.
So it is, you are correct, it is split, but the duties are split. So basically, for the on-campus, they have their own campus police that patrol that and ensure compliance, and they retain those revenues solely. If they put the parking resources towards it with their cadets and their enforcement officers, then they use those revenues to pay for that enforcement. And then we do the same with any of the lots that are on the city side. We both have the ability, should it be needed, to go and enforce on the other property, but generally speaking, we do draw the line on the enforcement and say we kind of each do our own thing and retain those revenues separately from this agreement.
Got it. So just to be clear, the enforcement is handled individually by GCCPD or their organization, GCC, on their campus, and then off-campus parking facilities are handled by GPD.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, excellent. That's, yeah, it just seemed a little bit complex, and so I wanted to get an idea of what the thought process was behind it.
I think the easiest way for the thought process is it is a partnership, and it is for the betterment of both the students as well as our residents.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you, Mr. Salim.
Thank you.
So, all right, so Samuel, do you want to just continue to do your PCI?
Oh, okay.
Since you're already up.
Did they want the full presentation?
Oh, so I do have a question for Chair Miriam. So we have the full version of it and the short version. Would you like us to do the brief version this time due to the many things?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yes, all three of us are veterans, and we've been through this. And as long as the full report is available, online, which I see it, so it is. I'm okay with getting a brief. Give us your best points, most important takeaways.
All right, so then we'll start with slide 11, the objective and scope, and then cover the result from this round of testing.
Okay. So the objective, like always, is determine the city's ongoing compliance with PCI policies and procedures. The scope was the PCI DSS requirements as defined by our external qualified security assessor. That's the professional that comes at the end of the year and does their formal PCI audit for the city. This is the second of 3 planned audits for the year. For this current audit, we looked at a total of 15 items, 6 sites, 3 systems, and 6 calendar tasks. And the goal at the end of the year is to basically mimic all the site systems and tasks that the external auditor looks at. So that's the goal, to look at them once at least between these 3 periodic audits. So we covered that. We look at site visits, system assessments, and calendar of events. The sites are essentially where you go in person, hand them your credit card, and do something in person. Systems is essentially something you do online, some type of virtual payment. And then the calendar tasks. So these are just basically to-do items that we put on the calendar just to make sure that we're up to date and on top of the many different tasks that need to be done throughout the year. And for this current audit, we looked at March, April, and May. That's why you see those red check marks there. Summary of results. So for the sites at the top, we looked at 6 sites, and we had 1 exception. For the systems, we looked at 3, and there were 3 exceptions we noted. And then the calendar tasks, 6 were reviewed with no exceptions. So basically the 2 findings, the first one related to the sites is 1 location had about 4 employees who didn't take the required PCI DSS training that's required of every individual who's involved with credit card processing. So after the finding, all 4 were trained, and they're up to date now. It's important to note that even though they didn't receive PCI training, they do know how to process credit card payments. So I mean, just like when you go, to the grocery store and someone takes your credit card, like they know how to work the credit card machine, right? But they may not have what the PCI DSS training provides is, it provides them a knowledge of why it's important, what are the things to look out for, what the things to do, what not to do, that type of thing. So it is important, and all 4 have been trained, so this is considered closed. And the second one relates to our systems. So we have these third-party processors that process credit cards on the city's behalf. And there are a couple of ways in which they demonstrate compliance and the importance of PCI standards. One of them is in the actual contract with them. They're required to acknowledge that they're aware of PCI and they're going to be up to date with the PCI standards. And a secondary way is a form called an attestation of compliance, and that's basically a certification that they performed an assessment of their controls and that their controls are PCI compliant. And so for the 3 systems that we looked at, there were some inconsistencies, some kind of vague statements in there that us in conjunction with the third party, with our quality assurance auditor, that together we said that it requires some clarification. So our treasurer's office is going to be working with the departments to obtain updated AOCs from these 3 vendors. So this one is still pending, but we hope to close it out shortly. Those are the 2 findings for this audit. I'm here to answer any questions you may have. I believe our Assistant City Treasurer, Gia Murray, is also in the audience. If I can answer anything, she may be able to chime in. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Salim. Opening the floor to questions from my fellow committee members.
No questions for me.
Don't have any.
I just have one question. So these 3 systems that you checked, if their AOCs are not up to par, does that create liability for the city? or is the liability contractually on the service providers?
Yeah, good question. Contractually, they are liable to, they are responsible and liable to stay in PCI compliance. This is just another secondary, some secondary evidence that we obtained to get some assurance and comfort that they're on top of things. A lot of times, it may not be completed by a PCI professional, so maybe their understanding of the question is not what a professional expects out of it, and so we did have some of that. So, so that I believe that's the reason why. But they are contractually responsible to be PCI compliant per the contract.
Now, if any of those are found to be not PCI compliant, does that affect our PCI compliance?
So if they're not PCI compliant, then at that point, then we have to have a conversation: is do we want to continue a relationship with this vendor, knowing that they're not PCI compliant? But that's not the case right now. But if someone were to be out of PCI compliant, that would definitely be a discussion that the parties involved would probably have.
Excellent. Thank you. That's all the questions that I have.
All right. Thank you.
Ms. Young.
Sorry. The last presentation we have today is the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase Agreement Audit, and Natalie has prepared a presentation for you. Well, this one, I'm responsible for getting the PowerPoint. Here. So there's one thing I wanted to point out is that this agreement expired on June 30th, 2022. And it's one of the many long-term agreements that GWP has. So the recommendations from this audit are basically focusing on controls that can be applied to most, if not all, the other long-term power purchase agreements. So with that, Natalie, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Marion and fellow Audit Committee members. My name is Natalie Manami Valdivia, and I'm the Senior Internal Auditor within the Internal Audit Division. I'm here to present to you today the results of the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase Agreement Audit that was completed this past quarter. So let me start off by providing you with a little bit of an overview. The Pleasant Valley Power Purchase Agreement is an agreement between the city and Avangrid to purchase 6.94% of the energy generated by an 80 wind turbine project that's located in Wyoming. This agreement became effective in October 2006, and like Jesse mentioned, expired June 30th of this year. Let me walk you through the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase cycle. The cycle consisted of Avangrid scheduling energy transmission and the city approving them. On a monthly basis, Avangrid invoiced GWP for the monthly transmission. And we have GWP has a third-party vendor that reviews the invoices and resolves any discrepancies with Avangrid. And then once they've finished their review, they provide GWP with a final verified sales and purchases report that GWP Settlements Group can use to perform their review and approval of the monthly settlement invoice. So once the invoice has been approved, a payment is wired to Avangrid. Then the last step of this process is on a monthly basis, Avangrid will electronically transfer any renewable energy credits to GWP. The next slide, as we will discuss later, the power purchase invoices, I'd like to share with you the three components of the Pleasant Valley invoices. the Pleasant Valley invoices include the current month transmission calculation, which is for the energy that's been delivered. The second component is the rejected schedule calculation. And the third is the prior month true-up calculation. So the true-up calculation basically is a reconciliation between the energy that's delivered and the city's portion, that 6.94% of the total plant's generation. And then for each of these invoice components, there are several documents that are required to be obtained to recalculate the invoices. So I've just listed them here for your review. The objective and scope of the audit, the objective is this audit was to determine if adequate controls exist to ensure compliance with the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase Agreement and to focus in on the agreement terms and the renewable energy credits. The scope of our audit included invoices for January 1, 2021 to December 31st, 2021 energy transmission. The audit process consisted of reviewing the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase Agreement, its amendments, and other information, interviewing city personnel and other third-party vendor personnel, and performing test work on the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase invoices and the renewable energy credits. To summarize our audit results, internal audit reviewed the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase Agreement and found that the invoices and the renewable energy credits were generally accurate. We did have 7 opportunities for improvement identified, and I've categorized these 7 improvement opportunities into the following 3 categories: power purchase invoices, contract compliance, and general controls. And as Jesse mentioned, it should be noted that although the contract did expire at June 30th of this past year, the controls that we recommended will benefit other existing and future power purchase agreements. So let's get started with the first category, which is the power purchase invoices. And there were 2 observations that were related to power purchase invoices. The first one was that there was a credit of approximately $1,000 issued by Avangrid for rejected energy in March 2021 that was not taken or applied to a future invoice. The second was that, The second was that GWP was not receiving all of the supporting documentations necessary to recalculate the invoices. There were monthly true-ups that were not performed timely, and they were caught up in November, but we also noted that there were small calculation errors in those monthly true-ups. The second observation was related to the final verified sales and purchases reports. We found that there were some errors in those reports, and that they didn't separate out each of the individual components of the invoices, which made it more difficult to verify that the rejected schedules were appropriately settled. So our recommendations to management include, Our recommendations to management included that they review the invoices for completeness and accuracy, that they obtain and review all the necessary supporting documentation to recalculate the invoices, and that they request that the sales and purchases report itemize those invoice components, and that they establish a procedure to track any updates to the final sales and purchases reports. Now let's take a look at the second category, which was contract compliance, and there were 3 observations related to this category. The first was that based on our audit, we noted that there are currently no documented policies and procedures related to the Pleasant Valley Power Purchase Agreement settlement review or the contract administration. The second was that GWP staff does not validate the accuracy of the renewable energy credits upon receipt or upon transfer. And the third was that the city contacts are not reviewed and updated for staffing changes. So our recommendations to management included documenting specific power purchase agreement procedures, creating a checklist of the required reports and submissions, verifying the renewable energy credits, and updating the city contacts in a timely manner. The last and final category is general controls, and there were 2 observations included within this category. The first was that staff have not been trained and cross-trained to perform the monthly power purchase agreement invoice review. And the second was that there's no tracking of the computers that have the OD, which is an energy industry software installed on the computers. So our recommendations included that they train and cross-train their employees on the monthly invoice settlement process, and also that they inventory the computers that have the OD energy industry software certificates loaded on them. That concludes my presentation. I would like to thank GWP staff for their assistance throughout the audit. We have Dave Davis, the Utility Finance Manager, and George Debe, the Senior Utility Financial Analyst, and I are here to answer any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Minami Valdivia. Questions from my fellow committee members?
I have a question here.
Yes,
So
Mr. Brown.
how often are these invoices issued?
On a monthly basis.
To the monthly, and what's the complexity of reviewing those invoices? Is there like many pages of data in there, or?
Yeah, so like I detailed it just quickly, let's see. There are each of these components. So I think that the most complicated portion is the prior month true-up calculation, which consists of reconciling the energy that was delivered versus our negotiated or our contract agreement 6.94% of total generation. So in order to review that calculation, they have to take a look at what energy was delivered, and then in addition to this, there are different thresholds. So if they are 95% of the total generation, there is one calculation. If it's over 105% or if it's over 125%, there are separate calculations. So those, so basically there's some leadway between the 95 and the 105%. But then they need to take those ICE index prices, the monthly and the average, I believe it was average monthly prices, might be weekly, but the ICE index prices to calculate what the adjustment should be. And like you can see, it also includes the NERC holidays because there are peak and off-peak hours. And then the raw meter data reflects how much generation was actually output by the Pleasant Valley project, and then the raw schedule and the raw prices. The same thing, rejected schedule calculations. Out of the 12 months that we took a look at, there were only 2 months that had rejected schedules and required calculations, and that uses a separate index called the Power Ducts Index Price. And then the first component was the current month's transmission, which is basically the sales and purchases report multiplied by a standard rate, negotiated megawatt per hour rate. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, good job in catching that credit that was missed, right? But the other part of this is, so I'm assuming they give you some sort of Excel sheet or something to be able to somehow, dissect the data and match it up to your source system, I'm assuming, right? And that's how you were able to kind of match up the energy usage and the, all those line items, all those 7 line items you have there?
Yes, so basically Avangrid provides our third-party vendor with an Excel spreadsheet that includes tabs for each of those pieces of information. We can independently review those through our third-party vendor who has access to the indices. And we actually went back and during our audit, asked Avangrid to provide us with the raw meter data, and we used that to verify the numbers that they provided in their calculations.
How long does it take to review one invoice?
I don't really know. I apologize.
I'm just wondering, because it sounds complex. That's why I'm asking, just because the timing of the staff to review all this.
It is, and I think that's why one of the reasons that we have a third-party vendor that does that settlement process for us and then does the back and forth with Avangrid to resolve any discrepancies. So our settlements group basically does a spot check. They do review the sales and purchases report, but they don't really go in depth in reviewing each of the components. Our recommendation, though, was that we request and obtain each of the supporting documents so that we can go back and check that we have all the available information to spot check each of the, or selected invoices.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Khashidurian?
Yes, I guess I have a couple quick questions. So the reason why we are not renewing, well, let me ask you this question. You said it just expired last month, and we are not renewing because we don't need that renewable energy anymore, or like we're trying to find somebody else to provide it? What is the reason why we're not renewing it?
I don't have that answer for you. I know I did ask whether it would be renewed, and I believe that that they will renew, they will negotiate other renewable energy contracts, but this particular one will not be. I don't believe this one will be continued.
Okay.
Is there anybody that can answer that question? No?
Unfortunately,
Okay,
I don't think so.
okay.
Could you also tell us a little bit about, that item, rejected schedule calculation? So what is that exactly?
So the rejected schedule calculation is basically when Avangrid has scheduled energy, and for some reason, one of our lines, maybe because we use other agencies or other entities' lines to bring the energy to Glendale, and if one of those lines goes down and we're unable to bring the energy to Glendale, then the energy is considered rejected. So then what happens is, in our agreement, there's a clause that says if we reject the energy, Avangrid will do what they can, basically, to resell that energy, and then we get a percentage of the proceeds from the resale.
Oh, so we have a set amount that we are paying them regardless of whether or not we consume?
Yes.
What's that amount?
$63 per megawatt hour.
So 7% of 144 megawatts is what, like 10? How does that work? What's the total? Like, what's the total monthly, what are we talking about here?
So I have that. Hang on for me 1 second. So for 2021, we had about 25,091 megawatt hours, and it averaged about 2,100 megawatt hours per month.
And so how much was it per megawatt hour?
$70?
$63 per megawatt hour.
$3, so you're talking about
$120,000, $30,000 a month.
Correct. It was 2.3 million for the year, and then an average of 189,000 per month.
How much is the third-party vendor getting paid? I'm just curious.
That's a
just
difficult
curious.
question because the third-party vendor does more than just this particular invoice settlement.
Got it.
So.
Got it. So
I don't
they're a
have an answer.
third-party vendor that handles more than one of these?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Khashidurian,
I'm
sorry, I
still
jumped
curious
in.
to know, I'm still curious to know how come we are paying a fixed amount? Like, you're buying something and you're buying for what you actually need to buy, but like, it looks like we're paying a fixed amount, and, the amount that you're consuming varies from month to month. And like, I'm trying to understand why we would create a contractual agreement like that. What are the justifications for something like that? I know this is all in the past, but I'm like curious to know.
Well, we have other renewable contracts that are similar, right? Where we are getting energy transmitted from someplace else. So
Correct.
For us, it's just a matter of having background and understanding what the process is, because then that's how you identify, risk and, how big the risk is, and so that we can actually just give our thoughts and recommendations.
I have a thought.
Yes, Ms. Young.
Maybe is the reason, but I think it's a mutual benefit to both parties. They generate the power, and we committed to purchase that amount and then to fulfill our obligations for renewable energy or clean energy goals. So I think that's one of the reasons I can think of.
But is there a cost difference, like when you engage in a contractual agreement like this, between the cost of producing 1 megawatt of power here, locally versus buying something, like, yes, I understand it's renewable energy, but are there like the cost comparisons possible? And do we know whether or not we're paying more? Do we know, like, if you engage in a fixed agreement to purchase a fixed amount? And this is actually a very interesting conversation. I don't know if you knew this or not, but back in 2017, I saw a report that said California actually was paying to sell. Like, you're selling something, but you're paying people to buy your excess energy. And so my thought process was that why do we, but during peak hours, not peak hours, during the hours that we had a lot of energy produced, and other states would not want to buy it. So we paid Arizona to not only buy, but like there's no buying involved. We are paying them to just take our excess energy. And like, I'm curious to know what are the basis for these types of agreements. And it's not, again, necessarily related to GWP. I'm guessing something like this happens across the board, but like, I'm not exactly sure why would that be the case. And also the other question that might just, again, out of curiosity, now that we are not purchasing this, is it because we have met, I think I mentioned this, our obligations for the renewable energy? Do we know what that number is? Like, what portion of the energy, is it 2%, 3%? I know we have a lofty goal of like 30 to 50% needs to come from renewable energies by a certain date. Do we know where we are at that, like in terms of accomplishing that? No. I know it's not part of this review necessarily, but.
It was outside the scope of this review, but I know that they do that analysis and they report those results on an annual basis. And I know that the $63 for those renewable energy credits, basically we're paying for renewable energy credits to to be in compliance or satisfy our requirement. And those renewable energy credits are transferable to other years if we've exceeded our renewable energy requirement.
It's not necessarily, if I understand this correctly, it's not necessarily because we need the energy, it's just we need the credits, right? I think that answers at least some of the questions.
Probably both. I'm not, yeah, well, I wish
Ms. Young.
the GWP general manager, if he's here, then we'll have a better answer, but.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if we can just offline get just a brief understanding, it would help us contextualize this a little bit better.
Okay.
The audit is excellent. There's no comment on that. It's a complex concept here, and I feel like I'm trying to put my fingers on what the liability and the risk is without a kind of a true understanding of everything that's going on, which I imagine, as an audit function, that is what you're looking, that's really what you're looking. You're looking for an understanding of what is happening and why it's happening, and then paring down into the detail of what the audit is referring to. So if we could just get an answer to those questions offline, I'd appreciate it from GWP.
Yeah, we'll get back to you. And I will reach out to GWP, those experts, and then we'll email you the answer.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Young.
All right. Let's see. So I will continue cover the activity report. The next section is project in progress. So we have 2 projects in progress right now. Let me actually put this on screen so we can see them. So we are here. So we have two projects currently the team are working on. One is the public records request audit, and one is the tree trimming contract audit. The public records request audit is actually, the field work is completed, so we have a draft report out, and we're reviewing with management to finalize it. So I'm pretty sure that at next meeting, you will hear a presentation from Ani on this.
I'm excited about that one.
I know. So, let's see. The next section is continuous auditing. So this past quarter, we did one testing, double dipping test. This is to compare the P-card charges against the employee expense claims and to identify if there are any double dipping, and no instance of double dipping found. And then the review period we covered is from July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. So the next three sections are covering audit follow-up. So we performed quarterly follow-up, and the So for this past quarter, we have followed up with department on a total of 43 outstanding items from 10 audits. And at the end of the quarter, there were 38 items remain outstanding. So section 5 covers is a list of priority 1 audit items. And this first one we'll talk about in the next, it's included in the next section as well. The second one, sewer billing audit, this item, it's almost done. We just have one particular questions pending from department, and I'm hopeful that this will be completed this quarter. And then the next one is the emergency medical services revenue recovery audit. This item is related to document all their policies, procedures, cover various processes involved. So they made a lot of progress on this, and kind of a policy manual has been outlined. So GFD staff has been working on this. So hopefully next quarter, right? Natalie will be able to close it. So then section 6 covers outstanding audit items meeting certain committee discussion criteria, which include if any items are identified as not implemented, item has been not implemented for more than 2 or 3 years. So we have quite some 5 items listed. 3 items are from one audit, Modern Parking Inc. contract audit. All 3 items are related to recommendations for the future RFP, which I think parking section is working on right now. So, and then the anticipated completion is December 31. So it's not going to be completed this quarter, but hopefully next quarter we'll have these implemented. And these 2 are from the Huerto and the Capital Recycle Water audit. So this is the one, as I mentioned the last time, it involves external parties. So then it's a kind of a little bit out of control. But we do have a representative from GWP here. If you have any questions on, but maybe additional detail on why these are still outstanding. Any questions before covered?
Any questions?
I mean, the only question that I have, going back to the, that one, the item regarding the not being able to communicate with GUSD, like, let's say if there's no response from GUSD, what will happen next? Is there any way to maybe communicate with them using a different channel of communication?
Chair Mirian, members of the committee, Michael DeGhetto, I'm the Chief Assistant General Manager for Water at Glendale Water and Power. The channel that would be available is for the city manager to speak to the superintendent, and we've done that once already. And I even do have an update, kind of since I put the information together for this. And it's really down to kind of like the managers, maybe the site manager or the person that oversees physical plant work at the school. And that person did get back to my staff since I put this information together. And really where we're at right now is working out an agreement where we're going to help pay for some of the on-site improvements that have to be completed. So it's with, I think the next step is the GUSD attorneys have looked at it. It's going to come back to us and city attorney's office. We're going to look at the agreement again and hopefully get that finalized so we can get permission to sign the agreement to provide some of that funding. And the reason that I have that completion date out till June of next year, it kind of just gets into the fiscal year issues again, where they have to budget, do the work, because and I'm not sure about their internal bidding. They probably have to bid it as well and have a contractor do that work, a plumbing contractor on site there. So hopefully that answers.
Yeah.
What is the effect to either Glendale USD or GWP for this work not, to continue to kind of be not completed, unresolved?
Chair Mirian, the effect to GUSD is their monthly water bills are higher because they're not being able to use recycled water. So it provides some benefit, or actually a lot of benefit for them, because it's shifting a big part of their usage, which is outdoor watering, to recycled, which is a lower rate. And then the effect for GWP is, and I've tried to minimize that because this is related to grant funding. It's a Prop 84 grant, which actually the voters approved in 2006, and it got held up by Governor Schwarzenegger during, kind of the downturn. And so we didn't really get a funding agreement until around 2016 for the grant. So I've asked staff not to apply to actually get the check until we get this straightened out, because I don't want to have to write a check back, right? I don't want to have to refund the money. And we've spent the money on our side of it related to, we spent around $900,000 or so to construct our pipeline. So really the only downside would be, and I would be worried if that asset wasn't put into service. So let's say this doesn't get completed, we'd tie that pipe maybe into our potable system just so we get use out of it. So I guess the downside again would be GOSD not getting that benefit of lower rates, and then just us kind of not getting that grant funding, which would at this point go to our fund balance.
Yeah.
It would be cash.
And this might not be a question you can answer, but what is the approximate impact financially to GUSD, on a monthly basis of not having access to recycled water versus having to use just the regular water?
It's maybe $2,000 or $3,000 a month, because I remember our calc was around $25,000 a year. So
yeah, still okay.
Because it's 3 campuses as well, right? It's Hoover, Keppel, and Toll.
Yeah.
So
Okay, and how much is the grant for? approximately?
It was about 1.6 million. And, you know, we did the project, we came in under budget. So it's kind of, there's a little bit more of our total grant available that we can help subsidize.
Excellent. I appreciate the background on that. Any other questions
No
on
more
that?
questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Zhang, can we go back to the contract, the parking contract?
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. So what is the, what's the holdup?
Good afternoon, Chair Marion. Tad Dombrowski, Parking Manager. The holdup is originally when we did this audit back in, I'm going to say 2019, 2020, something like that, the contract was supposed to end in June of 2021. Due to COVID, we actually extended the contract for 2 years, which is now June of 2023. So now we're in the process of actually getting the RFP together, but that process was delayed due to COVID. And we had to execute a 2-year contract amendment that meant the RFP wouldn't be done in time, in the timing we had hoped for this audit to be completed. We wanted it to line up perfectly with, we're in the process of issuing a new RFP, and we'll make all of these changes at that time. But that was, we had to have a 2-year contract extension, which is why this got pushed.
Okay, thank you. So this will be off of our docket by December 31st, 2022?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. Ms. Zhang?
Let's see. I think we just have section 7. It's the field team assignment, and that's it. That's the report for this quarter.
Excellent. Any further questions on this item from my fellow committee members? Okay.
No.
Let's move on, please, to the next item.
Item 6B, fiscal year 2021-22 audit work plan review and proposed fiscal year 2022-23 audit work plan. Jessie Zhang, Internal Audit Manager.
So, Chair Miriam and Audit Committee members, each year we provide you a report on internal audit's annual work plan. So I prepared a short PowerPoint presentation to walk you through this report. So the purpose of the report, there are 2 purposes, as the title suggested. One is to provide you an update on the internal audit activities for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. And the other purpose is to provide you a highlight on work plan development process, including the actual proposed work plan that we're going to submit to City Council. Sorry, here. So the content of this report includes an executive summary along with 3 exhibits. Exhibit 1 is the reconciliation of fiscal year 2022 work plan, so it's a status update. And then Exhibit 2 is the proposed work plan for 2023, and Exhibit 3 is the risk assessment survey questionnaire that we used during this year's annual risk assessment. So just a quick overview of the this presentation. We're going to focusing on answering 4 questions. What is a work plan? How is the work plan developed? How did internal audit do in fiscal year 2022? And what is planned for 2023? So what is a work plan? So basically, it's a to-do list, as you probably heard me talking about this in the past few years already. And it's a dynamic to-do list. And this to-do list is not an optional one. It is actually required by the Glendale Municipal Code. So the GMC Section 208-130A states that the Internal Audit Division shall prepare an annual work plan based on an assessment of relative risk. So now I'll walk you through how the work plan is developed. So people say that a picture worth 1,000 words. So we'll use this one diagram to explain the work plan development life cycle. We call this diagram the risk-based audit work plan development model. So I will explain each of the 5 steps in the next slide. So step 1 is the starting point of each year's work plan development life cycle. It is actually the moment we file the plan with the audit, with the City Council is when the new assessment starts. And throughout the year, on an ongoing basis, we make adjustment to either the current work plan or to our audit universe. Audit universe is basically a list of potential audit projects that we maintain based on the feedback received from various parties. It could be you, the Audit Committee, could be CM, could be department heads, and even our auditors while performing other audits. Periodically, we conduct express risk assessment, as we've done this past year, the third-party vendor risk assessment. And also on a quarterly basis, we provide a work plan update to the city manager and the executive team to inform them what we have completed, what we are working on, and what are coming soon. And then we ask them if there's any changes, if they want to make any adjustment to the plan. The next step, step 4, annual risk assessment, is a more comprehensive annual process. And then 5 is a review and approval, and back to number 1. So I will drill down a little more the annual process in the next slides. And just once again, this work plan is dynamic and flexible and can be amended throughout the year based on the changes in risks and the priorities. So the annual risk assessment, step 4, included for this year, we conducted data analytics to calculate financial risk scores. We performed data analytics on the vendor data, and we share that information with the department. We asked the department to complete a risk assessment survey before coming to the meeting, so then the meetings can be more focused and productive. And we discuss their concerns, and we identify their top selected potential project to be included in the work plan. So after meeting with each department, we compile the list, compile the top-ranked project list, and moving on to the next step is we take that list to city manager and for him to review and make the final selection to be included in the proposed work plan that's included in the report, the Exhibit 2. And then, of course, today we review the work plan with you, the Audit Committee, and obtain your feedback and acknowledgement before we submit the work plan to City Council. So it will be a consent calendar item. Probably will go August 9 or 16, depends on if we can make it to their calendar. So once we submit to City Council, the whole process is start again for next year. So now we have a basic understanding of how this work plan works and how it's developed. Let's take a look at how we done in the past year. So last year, the original work plan included a total of 21 projects, and we added 3, prioritized 1, so it leaves us with adjusted final number of 23. As of June 2022, 19 of them were completed, and the remaining 4, actually 3 of them we're working on. 2 was listed in the report earlier we talked about, and the 1 we started just after the year end. So 3 in process, and the 1 was reselected to this year's work plan, and we'll be working on that one hopefully soon. So this slide, it's also in the report with a lot more detail, provides you with some performance highlights by the internal audit team, what we did this past year, how we enhance the team's capacity and the technical skills through obtaining Abutus script training, and to ensure our high quality work product, promote collaboration, transparency, maintain our learn and share culture, and be more agile and efficient. Basically, we not just talk the talk, we have to walk the walk, and we constantly looking within ourselves for doing things better and more efficient. And through this risk assessment process, we make sure that we audit areas that matter the most. So I'll spend a couple minutes. I asked my team if I have time to highlight one of these things, which one I should highlight for the committee. And then they asked me to do this one, the promote collaboration and transparency.
Good
This
choice.
item is actually related to the quarterly follow-up process. So audit follow-up is actually a very critical part of the whole audit project cycle. We want to make sure management implement the recommendations timely and appropriately. And this committee actually has the resolution number 2 that is addressing the quarterly follow-up to make sure that the recommendations are implemented timely. So so this past year we launched two things. So one is so this is a dashboard, internal audit recommendation dashboard, and this dashboard was fed by oh gosh, let me see, have your email address. So it doesn't work.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in any case, you have the idea. So basically, you can. There are a lot of slicers and these drop downs that you can slice and dice and choose the information you want, and then the tracker. Basically, is a Microsoft list that we posted on our SharePoint site that we collaborate with management. Had actually helped us tested that tool to make sure that the department can provide their status update anytime, anywhere. And we use that one list to share information rather than in the past. We have to use Excel spreadsheet, multiple spreadsheet, and email back and forth. So this help us to streamline this process and to be more efficient and transparent. So that's a quick overview on this. And so now, finally, this year's proposed work plan. So 2 of them were carried over project from 2022, which is the records, public records request and the trade ming. And then we have 13 selected from this year's risk assessment process. And we have 10 continuous audit and ongoing advisory projects. So a total of 25 projects. And also listed in the Exhibit 2 are the other optional projects, other potential projects that we could perform in case we finish them all, since I have a very productive team, or if there's any changes to the risks and the priorities. So, and then here on the slide, I have listed other routine activities, including the risk assessment, annual risk assessment, and maintaining a quality control system, quarterly follow-up, quarterly report to Audit Committee, this meeting and the reports, and also reports to the City Council, and providing the Audit Committee staff support, including the secretary duty. So I think that's it. Yeah, that concludes my presentation for this year's annual report for the work plan.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Questions from my committee members, my fellow committee members?
I have a quick question.
Mr. Hashidarian.
Thank you. It's sort of difficult to ask this question. It's more of a comment. But can you name, or are there any departments, offices within departments or agencies that are working with the city of Glendale that haven't been subjected to an audit in the past like 5 years? And if so, is it because they have constantly ranked, like the risk assessment has constantly ranked them below? Or because I would submit that, you know, even if you don't have a risk evaluation of a certain level, but you haven't been audited, that's in and of itself is a risk factor. And so are there examples like that? I remember like a few meetings back, I asked about which department was it? Like the permits department. And
It's on the list.
Okay. No, but like my question is not necessarily about that department. I have nothing against them. It's just that I would like to know whether or not.
No permits for you.
Yeah, I probably, very good question. I probably, you know, like just flying through the slides, the factors we considered in our risk assessment model, exactly the how long have these areas not been looked at is one of the factors built in the model.
It is one, okay.
Yes, basically the formula is if it's conducted within 5 years, then the score will be reduced, something like that. So that factor is considered.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. And I did want to mention, I was, when I was preparing this, I was like, I need to mention this to add. So we did, you know, when we say we gather feedback throughout the year, that all go into our audit universe. So after that meeting, you brought up the concern, we added that project in our list. And then we did discuss that with management, and they agreed that this area should be looked at. And the reason that that specific project is listed under the other potential project is because they're now going through a system implementation. So they're going to have a new system in their gov. So that's why we don't want to start audit right now, because then we'll be auditing an old process, then it doesn't make sense, right? So it's similar to the one project that we reprioritized is the credit card refund process. That's exactly for the same reason. It's the timing of it. We want to give the new system at least 6 months, if not a year, before we do an audit.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Parham?
So I have a question on your selections for 2023. Do you review any of the prior audits where they had high priority items that maybe we need to revisit again? That's closer, fresher to our memory, compared to looking at, a couple years from now. It's better to kind of come back and revisit some of those that were audited prior years because they had a lot of priority one risk,
Another good question. So in our audit universe, we're very careful removing anything from our list. So all the things that we've already done is still on there, and the tracking with when was conducted last time, the last report issued, all tracked in the worksheet. So then once you are beyond the 5-year, also you're going to rank up. So then it's now when we meet with department, we're not just going over the top ranked. Top ranked is for the CM, the deputy CM and the CM to review. And when we were meeting with department, they see the complete list, so that everything is being reviewed every year, re-review. And then if there's any new issues, concerns, that will be brought up. So.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question regarding Exhibit 3. So
Okay.
the risk assessment survey questionnaire. To whom is that distributed within each department?
To the department head.
Have you considered whether it would be beneficial to distribute it to more than just the department head?
Actually,
Been discussed or considered?
right, so we distribute the questionnaire, the survey to the department heads, but some department, the survey were not all completed by department heads themselves. So some actually ask just an example, we all know we have one director for 2 departments, the IT and the finance. Jason Bradford, he's the director for both departments, right? So then he asked us to, here, we have finance folks here, and then their managers completed the survey for the finance department, and then the assistant director for IT completed the questionnaire for IT department.
Excellent.
And also, just to add to it, at the meetings, so sometimes the department has just come by themselves, but oftentimes they do bring their senior manager with them.
Okay. And do you retain these documents? If one of us wanted to come in and review them, would that be something that we can take a look at?
You're
Because I'm
welcome to
curious how
review.
these.
You're welcome to come review anything.
Excellent, excellent.
Or we can schedule a Teams meeting or WebEx meeting, so we can share screen what we have.
Yeah, because I'm curious. I'm curious how they're responding, how much time it appears that they're spending on these questions. Are they one-sentence responses, or is somebody putting, look, my expectation is that they are doing more than sufficient work in order to express whatever their concerns are in accordance to the questions that you're asking. I'm curious. I'm curious to learn, even after this long, what that process looks like, and then how you're taking that and diluting it down to what the proposed work plan is. That's interesting to me. And I think it's also beneficial for the committee to understand how, first off, I highly recommend everybody looks at and reads through the 8-page 2021, 2022 audit work plan status update and proposed audit. This is an excellent report, which you've summarized really well in your presentation. I think it's important for us to kind of get an idea of how the department heads are responding to these things, and then how you internalize that. What kind of back and forth is there in regards to some of the questions that they may answer, that they may not answer, that they may answer, but it's not an answer that you expected? I'm just curious about that.
Let me just give you a very brief, you're welcome to come and look at the documents, but so in terms of how much time they spend, it varies. And sometimes it's not because they actually spent like an hour. It could be, they started but didn't finish, go do something else. So that we look at it, but not like, And also, as I said, we asked department to complete the survey before the meeting. And the reason for that is so that we can ask follow-up questions. So we made that very clear, almost like a mandatory, but I'm chasing them down, so please get it done, so we can have a more productive conversation. And then in terms of how we incorporate their answers into our work plan, there are 2 questions that specifically helping us with that. I think it's question number 8 and 10. One is the vendors, higher risk vendors,
Third-party
they
management risk.
identified. And then the last one is basically ask them, what's your top 3 concern area that we should have a deep dive to see if the controls are adequate and working.
Do you survey the department heads to, or during your meetings, ask them to get an idea of what their impression of the audit function is in relation to, their departments? Because I would hope and I expect that the department heads understand that audit is, internal audit is a powerful tool to leverage in order to realize where there are potential risks and liabilities, and also to realize efficiency and efficacy in their performance. But I'm curious what that impression might be. And do you ever ask those questions or survey them? Because I think there might be an opportunity there to have department heads or, the people who are answering these not go, oh gosh, if I write this, we're getting an audit, versus, you know what, this is going to help us be more efficient.
Yeah, I think the level of understanding how internal audit work varies, and some department heads are very clear on what internal audit can help them. So some may not, but yeah, that could be I'll think about some questions we ask them next time.
I'm just curious if they're in their offices and they think that internal audit is like, you're all like, I can't wait, which it's not. We know it's not. And so it's just, I think, an area that might be explored, because it's an opportunity for you to engage them and invite them to understand how they can better leverage the internal audit function. I know that city management understands that. That I have no question about.
Right.
It's just a matter of whether or not the departments also. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Young.
Jesse.
What?
It's Jesse.
Ms. Young?
Michelle.
Ms. Zhang.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm being mealy-mouthed. Miss Zhang. Yes,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
excellent. Let's move on to the next item, please.
Item number 7, Audit Committee staff comments.
We'll start with staff. Any staff comments?
Actually,
Yes,
probably
Miss Zhang.
should have covered in my presentation. I do want to, thank that the deputy manager, not here, and the city manager for their guidance and the feedback provided to us during this annual risk assessment process, helping us develop this work plan. And also, I would like to thank the entire executive team. They're very supportive. They submitted all the, as required, the survey prior to coming to the meeting. And all the senior managers that participated in this process. And also, I want to thank my team for another very productive, wonderful year. And it's fun working with you, the very professional and smart group of people. So then I thank for your support and your efforts, and I look forward for another great year. And last but not least, you, the Audit Committee members, the chair, you're always so quick in responding my email and approving agenda and presiding the meeting, and always have good questions. And yeah, the committee members. And then the fact that you are coming to the meeting, it become kind of critical in this past year in order to make sure we have a quorum. So I know some of you have to reschedule your own business appointment in order to come to the meeting. So I really appreciate all that you've done. So it's a pleasure working with this amazing audit committee, and I look forward for another great year. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other staff comments? Committee member comments?
I don't have a comment, but I have a question.
Please.
Would it be possible for us to maybe on our next meeting think about changing the meeting time? I know that we agreed a while back, but I am like, it sometimes forces me to reschedule my meetings on Thursday. Usually, like, any other day works better. So I was just wondering if that would be a possibility for us to at least entertain it as a thought.
Maybe we can,
Ms. Farbetti.
maybe we can revisit that, thank you, Chair Marion, when we have a full committee and we can bring some options. It'll be an action item in the form of a resolution to change the regular meeting date. But if you have some preferences, we also have to work with GTV6, the availability of the room. So all of those things go into play when selecting a new meeting date. If you have some preferred time or times to completely avoid, sending those to staff would be helpful. But I think we can schedule that for the next meeting and then have the entire committee weigh in on preferred hours.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and just from my side, I think if you have a particular day that works or doesn't work and you want to suggest it, I think just send it to staff and we can discuss it. And that way, at least the legwork can get done prior to the meeting and maybe a decision can be made then. So, yeah, I'm a little bit more flexible being a small business owner, so I'm willing to accommodate your schedule.
Thank you.
Otherwise, we won't have a quorum. Mr. Parhon?
Actually, thanks for bringing that up, because that's a thought I had as well. It's, I used to enjoy the morning meetings a lot more than the late ones. But again, thank you for the great report and the whole year of your staff. Did fantastic throughout this past year. And I think you guys with the, with the nice graph and keep doing that. It's all great, great information and very informative PowerPoints. So I know you guys dedicate good time on creating those PowerPoints so it can make it easy for us to understand the whole audit that you guys did. So thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, and I'll just echo Committee Member Parahone's statements there. I really do appreciate the work that internal audit does, and by extension, all of the various departments in the city of Glendale in providing them with the access and information in order to facilitate them doing their jobs to the degree they do it. So I appreciate the work that you do. It does make a difference. I've asked in the past about having some sort of metric, and you provided that, but some sort of metric of how much funds, taxpayer funds, have been saved through realized efficiencies and mitigated risks. That I know that's an extremely difficult, if not impossible, number to come to, but I suspect in the time that the three of us have been on the committee, it's in the tens of millions of dollars. So I don't just suspect, I know that for a fact. So thank you for the work that you do. And the other comment that I have, because Mr. Khashdourian isn't going to mention it himself, but Mr. Khashdourian recently received recognition from the accredited, you know what? I wrote this, Accreditation Council for Business Schools and Programs. And he received, an award, a fairly prestigious award from them. Mr. Khashdourian, could you tell me again what that award was? That recognition was?
Thank you so much. So there's this entity called the Accreditation Council for Business Programs, Schools and Programs, which is sort of the accreditation, one of the two accreditation bodies for business schools in the United States. So if a new university or a school wants to get the accredited for their business program, they typically apply to one of these two organizations. ACBSP also has a global footprint, so many countries, schools from other countries also submit their applications. So usually they have an annual event, and during that event, the regions within the United States, they select one person for the, again, graduate level and one person for the undergrad to be part of like their recognition and award. So my school is in Region 7, Western United States, consists of 12 states, and one person gets selected to get the recognition, and this year it was my turn. So thank you so much.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. What it means for our audit committee is that it shows the caliber of people that we have on this committee. And so it's, you raise our level through your excellence outside of the committee, and I wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank everybody, especially the staff, that makes our work even more, I think, rewarding with the great presentations and the reports and the opportunity to have a conversation. I always appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And my final comment is I wanted to congratulate all of the recently elected city council members, 2 of them re-elected, and the 1 new city council member, and state that I am very much looking forward to them filling our committee and, post haste. Congratulations. Let's move on. Next item, please.
Item number 8, new business.
Hearing no new business, let's move on to the next item, please.
Item number 9, adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
I'm the one they love to hate, but they can't get past. Pretty face, no